It was a quiet Saturday morning, just after 10, when Terrence Hall adjusted the brim of his cap while sitting in his car outside the store. The man staring back at him in the mirror didn't look like the CEO of a multi-million-dollar retail company. No expensive suit, no boardroom orgist, a man in a plain hoodie and jeans, blending into the weekend crowd. This wasn't a regular visit. Terrence wasn't here as the founder of the company. Today, he was just another customer, anonymous, unnoticed. There had been whispers lately, complaints about cold service, rude staff, and hints of bias in how customers were treated. On paper, his brand preached inclusivity, but on the floor, he needed to see it for himself. The store wasn't their biggest, but it held meaning. Located just outside Dallas, it had been one of his early risks, a gamble that helped grow his empire. He hadn't visited in years. Now, he was back, but this time without the red carpet. He stepped out into the sun, a canvas bag slung over his shoulder. The logo above the storefront still gleamed, bold and familiar, pride mixed with unease in his chest. As he walked through the automatic doors, a cool wave of air greeted him. Kids laughed. Carts rolled by. The store buzzed with weekend energy. To anyone else, it looked like a regular day. But Terrence wasn't anyone else. His eyes scanned everything. How the staff moved. Who they helped. Who they ignored. He paused near a display of colorful kitchen gadgets. A young woman in uniform chatted warmly with a customer nearby. Down another aisle, a stock associate silently adjusted merchandise. But his focus shifted toward the electronics section, where a young man leaned against the counter. Head down, scrolling through his phone. Terrence made his way over, slowly, like any curious shopper. He picked up a pair of headphones, turned the box over in his hands, and waited. The employee didn't look up. Not even a glance. Terrence lingered. Still nothing. He moved on, not ready to jump to conclusions. In the next aisle, an older woman looked around, clearly in need of help. Before Terrence could approach, a smiling employee stepped in. The woman smiled back, visibly relieved. So, the culture wasn't broken everywhere, but something still felt off. Back at electronics, Terrence gave the young man another chance. This time, he picked up a set of Bluetooth speakers and placed the box on the counter, right in front of him. Finally, the employee looked up, expression blank. "Can I help you?" he asked flatly. Terrence smiled politely. "Yeah, I was wondering if these are good for outdoor use." The young man barely glanced at the box. "I don't know. Probably." He started turning back to his phone. "Could you maybe check?" Terrence asked. Still calm. The employee let out a loud sigh, flipped the box over, and mumbled, "Says here they're weatherproof." No explanation, no effort, just a handoff. Terrence kept his cool. "Okay, and are they compatible with most phones and tablets?" The employee rolled his eyes. That was the moment. In that subtle gesture, dismissive, careless, Terrence saw what the reports had been hinting at. It wasn't just about bad service. It was about people being treated differently based on assumptions. Maybe it didn't happen all the time, but once was enough. He stood there for a few seconds, the silence hanging between them. Then he nodded slowly, picked up the box, and walked away, quiet, thoughtful, and deeply disappointed. He hadn't revealed who he was, not yet. But this wasn't over. Something was about to change. "Look, man," the employee muttered, barely glancing up. "All the info's on the box. You can read it yourself." He waved lazily toward the shelf behind Terrence. "Or just grab something else. Doesn't really matter to me." A heavy silence followed. The distant hum of the store buzzed faintly in the background, but between them it was still and sharp. Terrence felt it then, not just disinterest. This wasn't someone who was busy or distracted. This was personal. This was dismissive. He glanced around instinctively. Other customers were being treated like they mattered. At the front of the store, a young white couple was receiving cheerful personal attention from the same young employee who'd earlier helped an elderly woman with ease and care. Yet here he stood, ignored, spoken to like a problem, not a person. Still calm, Terrence tested the waters further. "You seem a bit tied up," he said evenly. "Is there someone else who might be able to assist?" The employee's lips curled into a smirk, small but unmistakable. "Nah, don't think. Anyone's free right now." He shrugged, with an edge of contempt. "Just figure it out, all right?" The word stung. Not because Terrence expected special treatment, but because he wasn't even getting basic decency. It wasn't frustration he felt. Not yet. It was disappointment. This wasn't about rudeness. It was something deeper, something darker, something systemic. And if this was how the staff treated someone they thought was just a regular customer, how many others had walked out of this store with the same bitter feeling? Before he could respond, the employee grabbed his phone and casually walked away, disappearing into the back. Like Terrence's presence meant nothing. For a few moments, Terrence just stood there, box of speakers in hand, frozen in thought. He considered leaving, just walking out, chalking it up to one bad encounter. But no, he wasn't done yet. He placed the box back on the shelf, his mind racing. That interaction hadn't just been unprofessional, it felt targeted. He had to be sure. Was this an isolated case, or was something bigger broken? He walked further into the store, into the clothing section. A young Latina employee was folding shirts at a display. She looked up, smiled warmly. "Let me know if you need anything," she said kindly. Contrast hit hard. Her tone was natural, sincere, no hesitation, no judgment. As Terrence pretended to browse, he watched her assist an elderly man nearby, helping him find the right size, even offering suggestions for a matching tie. Her patience was real. The man left smiling, grateful. Terrence felt something stir. Hope maybe the store wasn't completely off track. Maybe the foundation he laid still had roots somewhere. But as he moved toward the home goods section, something stopped him cold. Two employees leaned against a shelf, speaking in low voices. Terrence slowed his steps, pretending to examine a set of cookware. "That guy over there?" one muttered, subtly gesturing in Terrence's direction. "Probably just here to browse. People like him never buy the expensive stuff." Terrence's jaw tightened. The second employee laughed under his breath. "Yeah, look at him. Ain't got the money for any of this. Just killing time." A punch to the gut. They didn't know who he was. They didn't know they were talking about the man who owned the logo on the building. To them, he was just another black man, wandering around, easy to label, easier to dismiss. The way they said it, casual, comfortable, like it was normal to speak this way. Terrence didn't react. He didn't call them out. Not yet. He turned away, silent, and made his way toward the checkout lanes. He needed more. He needed to understand the full picture before taking action. At the register, he found a middle-aged black woman wearing a name tag that read Denise. She greeted each customer with patience and professionalism. Her voice was warm, steady. She smiled with ease. When it was his turn, she looked him in the eye. "Did you find everything okay today?" Terrence paused, choosing his words carefully. "Not exactly," he said softly, "but I think I'll hold off for now." Denise's smile wavered slightly, but she nodded with genuine warmth. "Well, if you need anything, just let us know. We're always here to help." It wasn't a rehearsed line. She meant it. For a brief second, Terrence felt the weight on his chest lift. There was still light in this store. Still people who believed in what he'd built. But that was the problem, wasn't it? The contrast. Why were some employees kind, present, and respectful, while others were openly biased, lazy, or were subtle? Terrence stepped out into the afternoon heat, the automatic doors closing behind him. The store he had poured his life into now stood behind him like a stranger. He sat in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel. It felt surreal. This business had started as his dream, a place that stood for fairness, for equal treatment, for pride. But what he experienced today, it shook that vision. The behavior from the employee in electronics, the offhanded, cutting comments in home goods. These weren't isolated events. They pointed to a deeper rot, a culture that had grown silently, without him noticing, and he couldn't ignore it anymore. He thought back to the early years, when every store opening had his hands on it, when every staff member had been chosen not just for skill, but for heart. He used to say, treat every customer like their family. But maybe, somewhere along the way, growth had cost him something he didn't realize until now. And the question he now faced was this: could he fix it before it was too late? Terrence leaned back in the driver's seat, the engine off, silence thick around him. Growth had brought success. Yes, but it had also brought blind spots. He began to question, were his managers truly fostering respect, or simply ignoring quiet discrimination? Had he done enough to prepare them to uphold the values he preached? He thought of Denise, the polite cashier who reminded him of what his brand once stood for. But employees like her were being overshadowed. The real issue wasn't one bad moment. It was the culture that had grown beneath the surface. Reaching into the glove box, he grabbed a small notebook and began scribbling thoughts. This wasn't about correcting a single store. It was about making sure every location lived up to the name on the door. From now on, every employee would be held to that standard. But before change could begin, there was something left to do. Terrence stepped out of the car and headed back inside. He didn't want attention or drama. This wasn't about his pride. This was about the values that had been compromised. He walked to the customer service desk and asked for the store manager. A man in his late 40s appeared shortly after. His badge read Brian. His posture was straight, his expression guarded. "How can I help you today?" Brian asked. Terrence extended a hand. "Terrence Hall," he said plainly. Recognition flickered across Brian's face. "Mr. Hall, if I'd known." Terrence raised a hand. "That's just it. You weren't supposed to know. I came in like any other customer, and what I saw wasn't right." Brian's face flushed slightly. "I'm sorry to hear that. What happened?" Terrence recounted the interactions, the dismissive tone, the whispered assumptions, the disparity in treatment. He didn't raise his voice, but each word carried weight. "This isn't just about one rude moment," he said. "It's about a culture that made it possible. A culture I allowed to form." Brian stood quietly. "I wasn't aware. I've always tried to lead by example." Terrence nodded. "I believe that, but clearly something's slipping. And it's not just on you, it's on me too." He asked Brian to gather the staff for a quick meeting in the break room. Within minutes, the employees were assembled, uncertain of what was happening. Terrence stood before them not as a stranger anymore, but as the man behind the company. "Good afternoon," he began, calm but direct. "My name is Terrence Hall. I started this business, and today, I came here undercover to see what really happens on the floor. A hush fell over the room. Some of you showed real kindness and professionalism, others didn't. And that's not just your failure, it's mine, for not keeping our standards alive. He turned to the young man from electronics. You dismissed me, ignored me, assumed I didn't belong. That's not just rude, it's damaging. Worse still, I overheard 2 employees making assumptions about me based on nothing but a glance. The room tensed. I'm not here to humiliate anyone, he continued. I'm here to rebuild what we've let slip. He paused, then added, because if we don't treat everyone with respect, this business doesn't deserve to grow. Then, Terrence turned toward action. Here's what happens next, he said. We're not assigning blame, we're building accountability. Every employee, including me, is responsible for representing what this company stands for. He looked at Brian. We're launching training in every store, not just about service, but unconscious bias. Respect isn't a given, it's taught, reinforced, and expected. Brian gave a sharp nod. Understood, Mr. Hall. Second, Terrence added, I'll be visiting more stores myself, Fun announced. I want to see the truth, not the performance. The employees exchanged glances. Some looked uneasy, others relieved. Finally, he said, voice softening, I want to hear from you. What's working, what isn't? You'll have ways to speak up anonymously if needed. Leadership should never feel out of reach. The room softened just slightly. I started this company to build something better, a space where people matter. Somewhere along the way, we lost that. But we're not staying lost. I believe we can fix this together. As the group slowly began to disperse, Terrence approached Denise. Thank you for your kindness today, he said with a grateful smile. You reminded me why this all started. She returned the smile. I just try to treat people the way I'd want to be treated. As Terrence walked out of the store for the second time, the weight of the day settled in. He felt tired but hopeful. He'd seen the cracks. Now, it was time to repair them. Driving away, he realized something. Facing uncomfortable truths wasn't failure, it was the beginning of change. And someone had to be the first to act.